The path doesn't have to be straight.
We have a lot of information that we can
job is to have a conviction to know why it goes.
Value courage.
You're listening to the We Get Real AF podcast, exploring the future with trailblazing women and girls in emerging tech, XR, AI, and futurism. Science and technology are reshaping our world at lightning speed. Engage in conversations that'll spark your curiosity and challenge what you thought possible. Inventing tomorrow starts now. And here are your hosts, Vanessa Alava and Sue Robinson.
Welcome to We Get Real AF. I'm Sue Robinson.
And I'm Vanessa Alava. Please remember to subscribe to We Get Real AF wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and be sure to spread the word about us and our mission.
We're excited to welcome today's Boss Babe guest. She's an author with 20 books under her belt, a CEO, data privacy expert, and fellow podcaster of the Data Security and Privacy with the Privacy Professor, Rebecca Herold. Rebecca, welcome to WeGraph.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here to chat with you today.
Thank you. So first of all, we want you to tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you, where they can find you on social, and where they can find your new book and when.
Yes, definitely. So online, you can find me on Twitter at PrivacyProf, PrivacyProf. I'm also on LinkedIn. Just look up Rebecca Herold. You'll find me. I'm on Facebook. Again, just look up Rebecca Herold. If you want to add Des Moines, Iowa, that's where I'm based, you can find it there. And then I also have a YouTube channel, The Privacy Professor. You can see some of my keynotes and also my TV appearances on the local channels.
Awesome. So talk to us about why we need to be concerned about data privacy. Just for people who don't know a lot about this, how big is the problem and why do we need to be aware?
Well, it is a problem. So many people, and you've probably heard this before, they say, I don't have anything to hide, so why do I need to worry about privacy? Well, what they're hitting upon when they say that is really only the confidentiality portion of privacy. And privacy is so much more than just not allowing people to see what you're doing. Privacy involves actually taking your personal data and using it for other purposes or taken completely out of context, so that when they take that information that really they maybe shouldn't have access to, like your health data, and using it for other purposes, such as determining if you should get a job or not, or if you should get a loan. It's that misuse and misinterpretation of your personal data that is a part of privacy that can really have long time damaging repercussions.
Rebecca, a lot of us are working from home, and I know your most recent book, you touched on data security and privacy for working from home. What are some examples of vulnerabilities that we now have when we're working remotely?
Well, there are many, and so many organizations have had to go into this work from home mode in a very quick manner. So they didn't really think about getting things set up and telling and giving training to their employees to know what to do to secure their home environment. If you shared the meeting information in a public area, such as on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, people can be snooping in on those meetings that you weren't aware of. So like if I was someone malicious and I wanted to know about this very juicy sounding meeting that's going on with a bank, I saw the meeting information online. I could get on there and you might not know, because you didn't know how to set up the security controls correctly. You might not know I'm on there. You might not know that I'm watching you and I can see where your window is at. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a first floor window. And I know where she's at because I see this map that shows exactly where they're located. And I see she's got some pretty nice looking stuff in that room. So, beyond just the security of the information and the privacy issues. It's also a physical safety types of things. So that's just one example of, what could be literally hundreds of other examples that I'm providing in my new book about why you need to think about establishing these security and privacy controls, and so many organizations haven't yet because they're just trying to keep their business going.
What are
Wow.
some inconspicuous, just household items that you might have, something that anybody listening to our show that could be really relatable that may not think that they're at risk at all? Can you name some of those?
Oh, certainly. So, right now, what's very popular are the Internet of Things, or smart gadgets that people have in their homes. They have security tools such as Nest and Ring and so many others that maybe people haven't thought about inside their rooms. They have baby monitors. Those are some digital spies that you don't think about. And certainly there are ways to use those freely available tools such as Shodan and Weegly. And I won't get into the technical details of that, but these tools are fairly easy to use to find open cameras in these baby monitors and in room security cameras to be able to actually see what's going on. I actually found people who had them in the rooms where they were working. And I don't know about you, but I like to use a big old monitor on my desktop because it makes it easy for me to see everything. Well, guess what? It makes it easy to see from across the world someone else who might have found your open camera if you did not put sufficient security or privacy on there. And I can tell you that these cameras do not generally come with security on them by default. So people don't put passwords and they don't put encryption on there. And then all of a sudden, they're doing work. And not only do they put themselves at risk, but also their business at risk because people can potentially see what they're doing on their screens or listen to their phone calls.
So you mentioned two things, and just for our listeners and also for my own edification, Shodan and Weegly, I think you said.
Yes.
So walk me through, if I'm a hacker, I assume these are software programs that I can use that identify open systems out there in people's homes and hone in on them, or how does that work?
Yes. So Wiggly, Wigli, it's a freeware tool. It's a software tool. It's been around for a long time. Everybody's got Wi-Fi networks now, or most people do. Do they have the security set up correctly in them? Usually not. And with Wiggly, these tools will show you the exact location of those, what I'm calling the open access points, which basically are doorways into your Wi-Fi network. So through Wiggly, it coupled with Google Earth is very easy to map where all of these open access points are. And not only does it show you where they are, it will tell you more things about what type of Wi-Fi router is being used. It will tell you if they are using encryption, what level of encryption, because some encryption is really easy to break. So, that's just kind of off to the side, very easy. So Shodan is different because, Wiggly is you're out within the vicinity, but with Shodan, I can look for these open access points through the internet. So these are things that are actually attached to the internet. I can look anywhere in the world and find them. If I wanted to look in your particular zip code area, I could do that. And when I see where these open access points are, then I can start using, my own other tools that I have, and more freely available ones, to go in and start saying, oh, well, let's look in on these open cameras that are inside the homes. In December of 2019, why there were reports about the little girl who had somebody talking to her in the room and she didn't know who it was. And they said, this is Santa Claus. Trust me, I'm your friend. And she's like, well, where are you? Well, I'm Santa. I know everything. Well, guess what? That could have been someone on the other side of the world who found that particular camera and decided that it would be fun to talk to a little girl in the room. But although that particular situation did not result in something harmful, people who want to do harm usually aren't going to announce themselves. Hackers get very rich by being hired by organizations, and sometimes legitimate organizations, to do competitive research. So that's something else you need to think about when you're working from home.
So I've got a question regarding, let's say you have this inkling or you hear the Santa Claus voice that's not supposed to be happening from your device, right? Or coming through
Right.
from your device. Can someone come in, whether it be law enforcement or investigation, and track the hacker from, like, the one that came into your system or that cracked the code to get into your internet to do that?
Yes. So the FBI, the United States FBI, for our international listeners, they actually do have on their site a place where you can submit reports of what you might be concerned about as being either a hacker, or maybe someone's not doing security correctly or privacy correctly. So the FBI has a place where you can submit this. The Federal Trade Commission in the United States, the FTC, on ftc.gov, they also have on their site a place where consumers can submit their concerns. So don't be afraid to submit it if you find something. I know a lot of people are very hesitant to submit this type of information, but it's something that if you aren't aware of a problem, the problem will only get worse instead of better.
Definitely.
Yeah. How do you know that you're being hacked? Like, I mean, other than hearing a creepy voice coming out of your child's device saying that Santa Claus, or getting some sort of threatening email, are there subtle things that we should be looking out for?
Yes. Well, first of all, before you even start using these, you want to first try to stop or prevent those things from happening. And that just does not happen enough. So when you are installing your Ring system, your other types of Nest, or your nanny cams, or anything else internally, these smart devices, you need to make sure that you establish the security and privacy controls within those devices. And I've spoken with so many consumers over the years. I've been putting out a free privacy professor tips message each month since 2007, and a lot of people get those, and I try to make them aware of this. And a lot of times my readers come back and say, I didn't even know. I just assumed that those controls and settings were made before I used them, so I didn't even know I needed to go set them. So make sure you change, first of all, if there is a password for a device, change that password. Here's another thing I've heard a lot of times over the years. They say, well, that's a good password. It's long and it's complex. And my point back to them is, yeah, but you know what? That same exact password is being used for that same device that hundreds of thousands of people are buying. So it's not secret. You need to choose a good, long, strong password. Two-factor authentication added on top of that if you can. And by that, I mean, when you want to change your password or use it, somebody sends you, the company, the vendor sends you like a code to your phone or to your email to enter to go in and make changes to that. So use a strong password, and then use encryption. This is so important. So many people don't use encryption. For that example I gave you, if they had required a strong password and then encrypted the images that were coming through those cameras, that person would not have, number one, gotten into that room to begin with. Or if they had been able to get into the room, if the transmission was encrypted, they wouldn't have been able to see what's in that room. So if they didn't know a little girl was alone in her bedroom, they probably wouldn't have started trying to speak with her and say that they were Santa Claus. They would have just seen darkness and said, oh, well, I'll go on to somebody else's house that's not using security.
So clearly, if you have a device that's a smart device connected to your internet, we're vulnerable And
Mhm.
you've mentioned a few things that we can do to minimize our risk. I have a question about these things that aren't quite quote unquote smart, that aren't connected to your internet,
Mm.
but still have like a channel, a wave, whether that be audio or audio and visual.
Mhm.
What type of things are we open to or susceptible to with those devices?
The good old Alexa Echo, right? Or the Alexa Dot. It's listening all the time. And, the security within those devices are only as good as the thoroughness of the engineers who designed the device. And I can tell you, I've been in the IT field my entire adult career, and I started out as a systems engineer. So I know the importance of designing and testing thoroughly. Well, with Alexa, the folks at Amazon who, have their engineers, they did a good job, but you're never 100%. So what you got to realize is, just think about it with Alexa or any Google Home. I don't want to, single out just one company. There's a lot of these devices, but the Google Home and Alexa are the most used. So any of these listening devices, if they say that they will only start recording when they hear the keyword or the wake up word, keep in mind, how do they hear that wake up word? They're listening. And there have
Mm-hmm.
been design flaws in those devices where actually those recordings were being made, not only because of a design flaw, but misunderstanding of conversations in the room. So, you've probably seen those published reports about somebody receiving thousands of dollars worth of dog food or whatever because Alexa heard somebody say something and misinterpreted what was said into a command to order thousands of dollars of dog food, and all of a sudden it was delivered. You need to keep in mind that these devices are not 100% accurate, and that if they're listening for you to say something, that means they are potentially recording what you are doing. So that's why it's so important when you're working from home or even in your own home environment. Like, what I do is I completely unplug my device when I want to make sure that nobody can actually mistakenly hear what is being said in the vicinity. If you have someone coming into your home digitally or in person and you don't want your conversations being accidentally recorded, unplug those devices. You don't need to have those devices plugged in and listening when you're doing something. It's safe. It might take you an extra 15 to 20 seconds to unplug it, but hey, what's your privacy worth? What's your business worth that you are talking about with these devices in your room?
That is such a great point. And, Vanessa and I have talked about this before too. It seems like we have to decide what's more important to us, convenience or privacy, because it seems
Mhm.
like when one goes up, the other goes down in
Mhm.
either direction. And so that's just something that people have to be aware of, to your point, Rebecca, all the time. Another device I've heard can be hacked that I had no idea, but does emit radio waves or some type of wave when you think about it, is key fobs. Is
Mhm.
that true?
Well, yeah, typically key fobs are Bluetooth types of transmissions. That's different than your Wi Fi router types of transmissions. But those Bluetooth transmissions, some of those are set up so that they can be transmitted very long distances now. I have my office in the third floor of my home, and there's a street out front, beyond my yard. The actual key fob that has the Bluetooth transmission, it could actually possibly be picked up by my neighbors across the road or anybody walking their dogs or jogging on the sidewalk, and I wouldn't know it. So, a lot of people say, but who cares about what's going on in your house? Well, if I knew a CEO of a large corporation lived in a home, and if I was malicious or if I wanted to steal trade secrets, and I knew that there was a key fob there, because there's tools to discover that again, um, I just walked my dog back and forth until I was able to see how to get into the house and then, target it in that way. Those types of things have happened. And I know a lot of people, just the general public, when they hear this, they're like, oh, that's so Tom Clancy, or that's, who would do that? That's just like something out of fiction. Well, oftentimes fiction becomes reality, and you just need to stay aware when we're in a digital world. You have to stay vigilant in making sure that what you're doing is done right.
You watch for somebody walking their dog back and forth.
Yes, please be concerned.
Yes, exactly.
That person is not on a loop. They're on a mission.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, Sam McLean here from InPhase audio producer and editor for the We Get Real AF podcast. I'm so glad to be a part of this podcast, encouraging women and girls to step into emerging technologies and celebrating the accomplishments of those who do. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at McLean Sounds or check out my website, inphase.biz. Thanks for listening.
One thing I feel that most people use very regularly is GPS. I'd love to hear what you have to say about GPS tracking and how vulnerable we are, and how I'd love to know how we can protect ourselves and minimize our risk when we're using GPS.
Most apps that I've seen actually track your GPS. And a lot of people don't realize that. People are downloading things like these silly quizzes and so on that are collecting your GPS. And guess what? When people download these apps, and I want to talk about this because I see this as a huge problem and it relates directly to your GPS. So many people download their apps, especially free ones, willy-nilly, and if they use it once, they're like, oh, I don't like that, I'm not going to use it again, and then they forget about it. If you forget about an app and it's on your phone, hey, it's still collecting things, it's still potentially transmitting out. So you need to completely uninstall those apps to limit that GPS collection. Now, others of your listeners might be saying, well, what's the big deal? If you have your GPS, not only can that tell you about where you're at, but just think about it. You can tell if somebody's going to the mental health clinic every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And if somebody knows, why are they going to a mental health clinic? They must have problems. There's a lot of assumptions that can be taken from that. Or they're going to the oncology clinic every day at a certain time. Oh my gosh, they have cancer. Well, if that information is collected by life insurance or health insurance organizations, and this does happen, how can that potentially be used to be incorporated into consideration for premium costs and so on? Another one that I think is important has to do with the stalker. It's a lot of times people view the GPS tools and the apps as stalkerware, because this is something that has been a long time concern. And, when someone actually is able to see where you're at, and maybe they're stalking you and they have ideas for harm involved, that has put people into positions where they were assaulted or even where they were killed. And I've been an expert witness in cases involving these types of situations, but one had to do with a person who gave a smart toy to their child, and they actually made sure that they had access into the data that went up to the cloud where the smart toy information was stored. So they used that to not only listen in to the conversations that the child was having with the toy and with the people in the room, but it also showed where they were at. So that helped that person to stalk and assault their former partner. I guess a big point I want to make to your listeners is it's not just about the purpose for which that data is being collected, like location. It's about the context within which that data is being used and the insights it gives to people's lives. So, you need to think beyond just that particular piece of data and think about the entire ecosystem of where that data is being used and how it could be used in harmful ways.
Another thing, like I'm sitting here, I just got a wearable device that helps track my fitness and my calorie expenditure and my strain and all this data about my health, which is really helpful to me as I'm trying to get more fit. But I'm guessing that you're going to tell me that's another
the portal.
portal
well,
to the dark side.
It is a portal, but here's the thing. There's this kind of paradox because they're helping people to be healthier, but on the other hand, they can be used in ways that also target people. This has been a problem, like especially with professional sports. Sports players having their contracts renegotiated because of data coming back from these trackers on their health. Or also especially with betting, oftentimes the odds could be impacted on the data coming from smart helmets that actually report back data about that person's physiology and their heart rate and their respiration and things like that. So it's all these ways in which data can be used for things that the typical general user of those items have no idea that data could be used for, and with artificial intelligence now can be used even in really wilder, unthought of ways.
I'd love to cover the difference between being connected to Wi-Fi as opposed to LTE, and how your risks change, because obviously when you've talked about minimizing your risk when you're connected to Wi-Fi, secure network authentication, and you can do that, like, what is it called, double authentication. So when you're on LTE and you're not connected to a network that has a password and you're just kind of open, how does our risk change, and how can we minimize our risk when we're using LTE as opposed to a Wi-Fi connection?
So let's say you go to a public library or you're in a coffee shop and it's like, oh, I'm going to just use my phone to get online. I'm LTE, I don't have to worry about things. Well, what if the location where you're going to on that phone is on the internet and it's has the ability to connect all these other types of networks into it? All of a sudden, what you had is what you think is separate has now been incorporated into this much larger, humongous ecosystem of many different types of networks, just all connected together. So what you can do about that, you need to make sure, like back to the coffee shop example, you still need to use passwords, even no matter what type of network you're on. Use passwords, use multi-factor authentication or two-factor, like you mentioned earlier. That helps to slow people down. But encryption, you need to make sure that strong encryption is being used, because that way, if people who are on the LTE, who are beside you in the coffee shop or sitting at the waiting gate in an airport, so they can't use still free tools. There's tools for that too, where you can see what's going across that transmission. So, when it comes to technology, you have to assume that basically if there's any transmission of any type going on, that transmission could potentially be intercepted.
So how do you encrypt? Like, I know how to do the two-factor authentication and set passwords, obviously, but encryption sounds like another level. Where do we go
Yes,
to encrypt?
that was my next question. Is like, what do I need to go? Where do I need to go where I know no matter what I do on my phone, whether I'm connected to Wi-Fi or LTE, I'm encrypted no matter what? So is it something you have to do each time, or is it something you set it and forget it?
Well, a lot of times it depends upon your device. So some devices actually come with that capability built in. So you need to go to the controls on your device to see if that has been built in. A lot of the late generation phones and computers tablets, those do have it built in. Now, it's not turned on by default usually, but it's built in. So, go and make sure you turn it on. Now, for some that aren't as late generation, you may not have that built in. There's freeware versions of it. It's called Pretty Good Privacy, PGP. That's something that you can look at online and download some of that free. And I believe they do have different versions for Apple and Android and Windows. And what's good is a lot of your listeners might be thinking, well, how do I install it? I'm not a tech person. A lot of these tools now are made so that they're very user friendly. So a lot of times the user interface is such that when you download it, it really does step you through how to implement it. The key is you want to make sure that you're not downloading something that professes to be encryption that's actually malware.
So just let me back up a little so I understand this. So first of all, we want to obviously install passwords. We want to delete any apps that we're not currently using. We enable two-factor authentication, and then we look, I assume, in the privacy section of our settings on our devices to see if there is an option for encryption. And would it say encryption or encrypt, or is there a word we should be looking for?
Yeah, it should say encryption. Now, some of the devices might say something like confidentiality, but the most that I've seen do say encrypt or encryptions.
Okay. And then we also unplug our Alexas and Echoes when we're not using them.
Right.
Yes.
And what else, Rebecca? What else is our...
I had a question, Rebecca, and I think I know what you're gonna say. But I'm like world's worst when it comes to this. Same passwords across the board.
Okay.
So the thing is, like, everyone knows how annoying it is. Every time you have to change it up. And I understand it's security and it's supposed to protect us more. But like, for me to remember 10,000 passwords for every application or for every device I use is not the most convenient thing. So what are your solutions to that problem?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, this is this problem has been around for a very long time, and it's just getting more complex. I mean, personally, I have probably over 100 passwords myself, and it's hard. How do I keep track of all that? Well, I do a variety of different things. So first of all, let me start with the most simple, where you start thinking about if you want to have the same password for certain types of services or something like that, that's better than having the same for everything. So if you want to start out with, small steps of getting better, have a password maybe for Facebook and for Twitter, but use a completely different one for your online banking and your financial organizations. And then use something completely different for your retail sites that you use, or also something completely different for your different delivery orders like Grubhub or DoorDash or Uber Eats, all that, because I know a lot of people are using those types of apps right now. I use those types of apps. So, if you want to have one password but for different categories of services, that's where you want to start. Now, after that, it is best to have a different password for every different service that you use. So how do you do that? So there are different types of password managers. And here's the thing with password managers. I'm not a fan of a lot of them that are cloud-based. Why? Because if they're cloud-based, that means that they're sitting out there. Nothing is not hackable. I mean, if it's a network or computer system, definitely a cloud, especially if it's a service that the hackers know contains millions of passwords, it's going to be a target. And there have been password keeper cloud services that have been hacked, and then all of a sudden all those passwords got hacked. So for password keeper types of services, I say, if you want to use one of those, use the kind that actually will store the passwords at your own location on your own device. So typically, these types of password managers will store like on an external drive or an external USB thumb drive that you have at your own desk. Or in your home. That's where it will keep all of your passwords so that you control physically that device where all your passwords are at. And this is going to make my next tip is something that I'm sure some of the technology purists are going to just have their heads explode. But write it down in a book. I have my home office, and right now most people have home offices set up. I have in this book all of my IDs and passwords written down, and when I don't need to use it, I have my safe. It's not anything fancy. It's a home safe. I keep it locked in my home safe. Now, here's the very important point. Who's going to get to the home safe in my office on the third floor? They'll have to get first into my house through my security system. Then they're going to have to get past my 2 Doberman dogs who are very loyal to me. Then they're going to have to figure out where that is even located because it's not obvious. So for those of you who say, oh, never write it down, it's okay to write it down so it's not just sitting on top of their desk or visible during their Zoom meetings. You don't want it to be visible there when they're looking through their book.
Don't plan to throw a surprise party at Rebecca.
Right.
Yeah.
So are we any more at risk having certain websites remember our passwords?
Just make sure you don't use that same password that you're automatically authenticating to at your other sites. So that way, if it does get compromised, it's not something that's going to impact you in all of the sites where you have a password needed.
I have a lot of homework to do this weekend.
Oh, me too. Oh, gosh. So, Rebecca, I've heard that passphrases can be better than passwords. Is that true? Is it better to say, I love tequila on the beach than coming up with just a password,
Sure.
Or does it not really matter?
I love tequila on the beach too.
I'm going to need tequila after this.
Yeah. Here's the key. You don't want to make it a passphrase that people know would be associated with you.
Common sense, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's common sense, but it's not always so common because you would be surprised at the types of passphrases that people use. So don't use the names of your children. Don't use the name of your company you work for. Make sure that as part of your passphrase too, that you aren't just using alpha characters, because there are tools that can crack passwords. So use upper and lowercase, use special characters, and use numbers. That makes it much harder for these password cracker tools to break.
That's a great tip.
So I have one more question regarding storage of the passwords, because I know many, many people that store their passwords as a note on their phones. What do you have to say about that?
If you store it as a note in your phone, and I'm sitting at a coffee shop or, at the airport, and I'm just, let's see what's going on around me. Oh, somebody's using the free Wi-Fi here. Or they're using the same LTE service that I have. If you don't have that data encrypted on your phone, then there are tools. Then I could potentially get into that note, because like you said, a lot of people use that, right? So that's the key. If a lot of people use a certain type of tool or feature of a phone or computer, then the cyber crooks and hackers and criminals are going to know that a lot of people use that. So those are the locations they're going to go directly to see what's interesting. There's some just basic things like strong authentication through very good passwords and multi-factor authentication, and also using encryption. If people would just do those things right there, that would probably cut down on the different types of successful privacy breaches by a huge amount.
let's talk about mail-in voting. November's coming up. There's a lot of controversy behind mail-in voting, or people that prefer that we all stand in line for privacy issues. So you are the privacy professor. Let's go for it.
Different states have different rules for how people vote. And when you're looking at all of those different voting solutions, everyone needs to keep in mind that every one of those solutions needs to be secured. Each system needs to be secured and thoughtfully engineered to address these situations. So when it comes to mail-in voting, a lot of people are afraid that, well, what happens if somebody decides they're just going to send in a lot of ballots, for one person? So they're stuffing the box, if you will. Well, with mail-in voting, if you have it set up to make sure that the ballot has the control code on there that's associated with only one person, and only one vote then is recorded because of that one ballot that is unique to that voter, you're not going to get ballot stuffing. Here in Iowa, probably about 60% of my votes have been through absentee mail-in voting. It's a physical ballot. I physically mark who I want to vote for, and I put it into they have what's called a secrecy folder. I put it into the folder, and then I have to put it into a special envelope that also has a code on it, so that whenever I return it, they will know that that particular envelope with that code, and then my vote, which is inside of a secrecy envelope, those have been accounted for, but it's still maintaining my anonymous vote. And once I have voted, in their system, they show Rebecca Harold has voted. Do not let anyone else, come in and vote, not even at the polling place. So on voting day, when somebody else goes in, and if they say that they're Rebecca Harold, they'll say, well, no, you've already voted. Too many people think that attempted voter fraud is successful voter fraud. The fact that it's stopped, it means the fraud did not go through. If you have the proper procedures and controls in place, and even though it's mail-in voting with physical ballots, those digital barcodes can keep track of where your ballot is at any point in time, and it can be done in a way that keeps your vote anonymous, and it can make sure that only one person gets one vote. And so I just view that as such a very good way to vote and stay safe during a pandemic.
It's the multi-factor authentication principle that you were talking about in our previous conversation with our devices, really. It's having multiple checkpoints along the way.
Yes, I love that. That's exactly right. That's a really good way to describe it. I mean, it helps to ensure that a person gets their vote, but they don't try to get more than one vote. Exactly. You look at the state of Washington, you look at the state of Oregon. They're all mail-in voting. I think we're around 12 or 13 that offer, a lot of just mail-in voting, if that's the only way you want to do it, or that is the only way to do it. So they've got their processes established. They've worked out the kinks. They know that every person gets one vote and only one vote, and they have found very, very little fraud, but they have high participation, which I think is great in a democracy. If you have a computer system that is a standalone, meaning no other computers are connected to it, and it's not got any type of wireless transmissions, it's just a machine sitting there that's doing its thing. You're putting something physical into it, and it's computing based on the code that it recognizes. It's going to be very hard, if not impossible, to hack a device that is just a standalone, that has absolutely no way to get into it.
Tune in next week, where we'll have more great data privacy tips in part 2 of our conversation with the privacy professor, Rebecca Harold. That'll air Tuesday, November 3rd, which here in the U.S. is also Election Day. So if you're joining us from America, make sure you get out and vote.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of We Get Real AF. We're excited to bring you the voices of amazing women and girls who are shaping the future for good.
Please help us spread the WeGraph mission of supporting women and girls in emerging tech and science. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Our handle is at WeGetRealAF. And visit our website at www.wegetrealaf.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and to subscribe to the podcast.
We also want to give a big shout out and thanks to Sam McLean for providing sound production for the show. You can find Sam on Instagram at McLean Sounds, that's McLeanSounds, and to our voiceover artist, Veronica Horta, for her show introduction. You can find Veronica on LinkedIn by searching for Veronica Horta, Horta.
We'll meet you back here next time for another great conversation about high tech with cool women.
The path doesn't have to be straight.
We have a lot of information that we
Your
can
job
find
is to
useful.
have a conviction to know why you
value courage.
You're listening to the We Get Real AF podcast, exploring the future with trailblazing women and girls in emerging tech, XR, AI, and futurism. Science and technology are reshaping our world at lightning speed. Engage in conversations that'll spark your curiosity and challenge what you thought possible. Inventing tomorrow starts now. And here are your hosts, Vanessa Alava and Sue Robinson.
Welcome to We Get Real AF. I'm Sue Robinson.
And I'm Vanessa Alava. Please remember to subscribe to We Get Real AF wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and be sure to spread the word about us and our mission.
Last week, we introduced you to Rebecca Harold, the privacy professor. She shared lots of great advice about how to protect your data during online meetings and when using common devices like your baby monitors at home. Well, this week, we have the rest of that conversation. Rebecca shares some more information about how to protect your healthcare data during contact tracing in the pandemic, and she talks to us about the implications of the Internet of Things.
Let's start with the IoT. So IoT stands for Internet of Things, and it's also often called smart devices because they have computers attached to them and they have data associated with them. It's not just with these things that you think about in your homes, but there are also devices, IoT devices or Internet of Things, that go beyond that. So there are some smart things that are called industrial Internet of Things or IIoT. And these are things that have sensors in them. For example, several years ago already, I was helping a transportation company that was creating a new type of technology to implement and actually embed in highways. And not only would it be embedded in highways, but they would put these devices in the light poles that go along interstates and roads. And so they hired me to do a privacy impact assessment to tell them, whether or not they had addressed all the privacy issues. So what's the privacy issues with that? Well, with these different types of sensors, they could tell not only when traffic was heaviest or lightest, but it was also tracking the license plates of the cars going by. While they took a good step forward with addressing privacy, they really didn't go far enough because you could still establish patterns to determine where people worked and the grocery stores where they shopped and the places where they took their children to daycare and the schools and so on. So so the IoT, the Internet of Things, industrial Internet of Things, it's ubiquitous now. I mean, we have smart devices probably located in areas that you may not even think about. Actually, there was a pretty big hack that took place through a smart stop sign that allowed entry into the network to which that smart stop sign was connected back in 2019. Not only do you have those physical locations that are pretty much stationary, but keep in mind every person you pass they might have some IoT devices on them. So you have IoT devices that are on feet, they're on legs, they're on wheels, passing through and creating these, types of networks. When I do my keynote on IoT devices, I like to show this really cool photo of Des Moines, Iowa during early morning when it shows all this mist coming up out of these beautiful lit up buildings. And I like to tell the folks in the audience, just think of that mist as the data that's just emanating out of all of these different buildings and devices that you see, because that's pretty much what it is. And a lot of people in technology call that data clouds. So when you're thinking about IoT devices, just think about the fact that the more devices you wear on your body, or that are on devices around you in your environment, those just have data that's potentially going out there for anybody to potentially access if that data is not encrypted or access is not controlled to that data.
On this fascinating subject of privacy, we were talking about working from home and the pandemic. And it makes me think of the amount of information that our healthcare providers have. And of course, now that's even more expanded with contact tracing and that kind of information that's being gathered. So what are your tips and advice for us when we go to the doctor? Are there things that we should not share?
Oh, I love that question. The business where I built a security and privacy program for throughout the 90s was a healthcare and financial organization, Fortune 100 organization. So I've been dealing with healthcare data since the very beginning. I've written 2 of my books are on HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That's a regulation here in the United States that has actually been in effect since 2003 for the privacy portion of it and 2005 for security. So with that background, when you go to a healthcare provider, your doctor, your physician, go to a clinic, whatever, they are bound to follow the HIPAA regulations that have many broad and also deep requirements for protecting your health data. So when it comes to your doctor has been under these regulations for now 20 years, right? 2 decades. So they're very aware that they have to follow very strict regulations to protect your data and not to share it inappropriately, and to make sure that they only use it in accordance with HIPAA. And actually the Department of Health and Human Services has issued many different multi-million-dollar fines against healthcare organizations who do not follow those requirements. And in addition to that, your doctors and clinics who have had breaches because of insufficient security, they have also gotten huge fines and penalties. What worries me is the fact that contact tracing often is being done outside of the healthcare space. It's being done by someone who is not a doctor or your health insurance company. An app creator who is collecting this data, they're not a provider, they aren't a doctor, they aren't an insurer, so they aren't bound by HIPAA. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. If they aren't bound by HIPAA, and I'm seeing this going on, and it's very disturbing to me that these app creators to do contact tracing, they're collecting very sensitive data, and they're sharing that health data, and they're doing it in ways that is not secure, that can lead to breaches, that can lead to decisions being made with your health data that have nothing to do with tracking where COVID infections might be at. Or they even are doing it in ways that give insights into the people that you have been around. So I think that is a huge concern right now, the fact that so much of our COVID contact tracing, which I absolutely support being done in a secure way that supports privacy because we need to get it under control. But on the other hand, there's too many opportunists out there that are seeing a way to collect a lot of health data and use it and share it in ways that go far beyond the purpose of controlling a pandemic.
So there's a huge ethics gap, basically.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh.
And then we have telehealth, which is now growing, right? My daughter had COVID-19 and she went through the contact tracing, which was just somebody calling her on her phone, which I'm sure isn't encrypted. and she actually had a telehealth appointment because, of course, a lot of medical practitioners are saying if we can do this online, it's better for everybody. But then we're sharing our information on computers that we haven't necessarily encrypted. So talk about that. Talk about telehealth.
When it's done by a physician supporting their patients, keep in mind, again, there are still the requirements of HIPAA that must be followed. So let's say, you or your daughter are getting online to do telehealth. And even if you don't have encryption on your system, that site that is being connected to, it has to have encryption, or it has to have the security built within it so that even if you don't have it, that's going to still help to protect your connection there. Now, there is a weak point there if you're doing telehealth from, let's say, again, the airport, or if you're in a place with free Wi-Fi in a coffee shop. But hopefully you aren't doing your telehealth out in public like that. And the fact that your doctors have to have a very wide range of security implemented to protect that telehealth is going to be something that I think provides many more people with the capability to get good health care. And certainly, especially in states and locations where so many different healthcare clinics have been shut down for a variety of reasons, I think telehealth now is something that's very important to use.
Hey everybody, Sam McLean here from InPhase Audio, audio producer and editor for the We Get Real AF podcast. I'm so glad to be a part of this podcast, encouraging women and girls to step into emerging technologies and celebrating the accomplishments of those who do. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at McLean Sounds or check out my website, inphase.biz. Thanks for listening.
I want to hear about your entrepreneurial journey, how you got into tech, and, obviously privacy and data privacy before the digital world existed, but now how you transitioned into the digital world. So run with that. Tell us about how you started.
I never planned for any of this. I took the road less open, or I was the squeaky wheel who said something had to be done, so people said do it. But basically, I first got a bachelor's degree in computer science and mathematics. And between getting that and my master's degree in computer science and education, I taught 7th through 12th grade math and computing. And then after getting my master's, I was hired to be a systems engineer here in Des Moines, Iowa. In 2003, I was going to a potential client to get them to speak with them about doing a risk assessment and privacy impact assessment for their organization. And an hour before my meeting, I got a call from the CEO of the consulting company I was working for. And he said, well, I'm shutting down the business. So I thought, oh, this is nice. I'm here in a different city. I'm going to meet with a potential client in an hour. So I thought, okay, well, I met with the client. I knew I could do this. I had done this type of work many times. So I told the client, I said, I'm not coming representing this business anymore. However, I want to do this work for you. So, if you hire me, I know I can do this work. And if you aren't happy with it, you don't have to pay me. So they hired me to do the work. They were very happy with the job I did. I had one of the conditions of hiring me was that I had to create my own business. So that's when I created my LLC. And at the beginning of 2004, they hired me back to do the same type of risk assessments and privacy impact assessments for the next few years. And then They were acquired by a much larger organization. And when they told me that one of the reasons why they were acquired was because they had such great security and privacy. So it really made me feel good to hear that I had helped them to establish security and privacy through the results of my assessment. I also started teaching at the Norwich University in their master's degree program for 9 years. And what I loved about that was all of the students were professionals who were working in the IT field as either security officers or they wanted to be. They were from all over the world. So not only was I helping to teach them about security and privacy, but I learned about their real life experiences. And, I even had students, actually several in the military, who were located active duty overseas in the Middle East. So it's just very surreal to have students who are completing assignments for this master's degree program. And then they're also telling you that they might be late because they either have to go to combat duty or dealing with something else. It seems like every time I've done something that has not been done before, that has always helped lead me to new things and new opportunities. So I would say to everyone that, don't be afraid to take the road that has not been traveled yet. In fact, just another one that I feel pretty good about. A few years ago, I was asked to take my knowledge and experience with the smart grid and security and privacy work there, and actually perform some real tests, security and privacy tests on some actual grid equipment. I thought, I've never touched any of that equipment. Am I qualified to do this? I doubted myself. So I knew some people who were PhDs in electronics. So I spoke with them. And I realized after I spoke with them, these were smart people who had published all these books, but they didn't know about the smart grid. And I just realized, well, shoot, if they don't know the answers and I don't know the answers, I might as well do this. It just made me feel good to think that even though I knew nothing about the equipment, I knew about the technology and the security and privacy issues and was able to bring some benefit to the energy industry. I've seen this in so many of my friends, my students, especially women. Oftentimes they're afraid if they don't know everything there is to know about something, then they don't feel that they're qualified to do it.
So true.
And
Yeah.
I want to let them know, you know what? You don't need to know everything there is to know about something. In fact, in today's world, no one knows everything there is to know about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so do it. I mean, just like, even after I'd been a professional for 20, 25 years, I was doubting myself. Don't feel that you have to be 100% knowledgeable in something before you do it. You can do it if you have that a grain of knowledge and you have the motivation to learn more. Go ahead and do it. You can do it just as good as anybody else if you have the mind to.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I think that's such a great segue into our lightning round. And we are so appreciative of you sharing all this great practical advice for our listeners.
And I'm sure, again, coming from 20 plus years of experience, 20 plus years ago, you didn't see many women system engineers or data privacy, IT people. So kudos to you. So thank you so much for all of your insights today. But yes, lightning round, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Rebecca, finish this sentence. Women are
just like men when it comes to our brains and our capabilities. I was a finalist in the Cybersecurity Women of the Year. I love the fact that women are being recognized, but at the same time, I'm thinking it shouldn't matter. I mean, you don't see the Cybersecurity Man of the Year because when it comes to being capable of doing things in technology, certainly gender does not matter. It truly doesn't. And I think too oftentimes people think that if there's fewer women in the field, that means they aren't interested. And that's not the reason. I think it has to do with opportunity. It has to do with having negative experiences. And quite frankly, I've had a lot of negative experiences from others just trying to tell me that I'm a woman from Podunk, Iowa. I was just told that 2 years ago. And I know it's hard to, but instead of focusing on the 1 or 2% of people who are nasty, focus on the fact that you've probably got about 98% of the other people who know you and support you, who are really cool and appreciate you. So hopefully everyone listening out there will realize that. And I know online trolls can be the worst, but you just got to learn to ignore them and secure your home so they don't find you.
And I so agree with you with that aspect of being recognized as an honor, but also, when they're still making a big deal about diversity and inclusion and including women in this space, that there's still work to be done. So I agree with you. The minute we can just say the best for the person who's done the best in this category, and it just goes to that person who's doing the best, not a woman or a man or whomever, just in general, a human being.
Exactly. Another hashtag, no big deal.
Right? What are 3 pieces of advice you'd give your younger self?
Well, number 1, don't be so afraid of what other people think. I used to just be too afraid of what other people might think. So like when I was getting my bachelor's degree in mathematics and computer science, a lot of times I wouldn't say something or speak up in class or at the first job I got because I would be afraid that everyone else knew in the room but me. Now I realize if I have a question, I ask it. And 9 times out of 10, when I ask a question, everybody around me are like, oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. And number 2, if you want to do something that not everybody else is doing, that's okay. I mean, when I was in college and I was a member of a sorority, but everyone else was in a different major. I was kind of the oddball out in math and computer science. So even if all of your friends are doing other things, but you have interests that are different than them, celebrate that diversity. It's okay. You'll still be friends. In fact, I still have friends from college that I'm in touch with today, and they're doing very, very different types of careers than I am, but I sure still have a lot of fun being around them. And then I guess number 3, to my younger self, I would say, don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that's going on that you feel needs to be fixed or that's not right. If you stay silent, you're complicit in what's going on that's wrong. I found over the years that, like I mentioned, you might be called names by someone, but there's still 98% or 99% of the others around who are going to support you in what you're doing. So, you could impact somebody in ways that you don't even realize. I've heard from people that have listened to some of my radio shows or read some of my books, and it just surprises me in a very pleasant way when they tell me how they decided to go into a certain career because of something they heard me talk about or something that I wrote about. And it's like, wow, really? Well, that's really cool. Because a lot of times I had considered not even writing about that topic or talking about it. So it's like, well, I'm glad I went ahead and did something that I felt might not have been something that, would have been right, even valued by anyone. So I guess those would be the 3 things.
What is your favorite current application of technology for good?
Well, coming back to those IoT devices, so they now have pills that you can swallow, and the circuitry is dissolvable. And I won't go into the makeup of it, but the circuitry dissolves, but it analyzes your digestive system and your other parts of your body, like to see if you have cancer or to see if you have, intestinal problems and so on. And it communicates with a patch that's like either on your waist or on your arm, and then it can communicate out. You have to secure it, but it communicates out to an app on your phone typically to give this analysis. And so you didn't have to go under the knife to find this out. It's being done through technology to help identify health problems. So I love that.
I've never heard of that, but if you know a woman who's involved in that, we would love to talk about that on our show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's an aside. Yeah.
What resources do you wish existed now for women in tech, or if you have a resource for women in tech that or people that are interested in getting in tech that they should know about, please vocalize that. We'd love to hear it.
Oh gosh, there are so many different resources out there. I mentioned doing work for NIST, again, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's at nist.gov. I would encourage women out there, check out their site, because it's not just about what I talked about. NIST covers all types of science and technology, and they have all these research reports, and they have all of this information out of their website, paid for by taxpayers, right? But yet brilliant people have created all of this guidance and this insight. So I would encourage women to go out there and look if they're interested in any type of STEM topic and check those out. Certainly there are many, podcasts like yours that you have that are very valuable resources. So certainly listen to those podcasts. I have my podcasts called Data Security and Privacy with the Privacy Professor on Voice America. And I've done that. And what I try to do with that podcast too, I think similar to yours, I try to really speak with experts and get their insights on various types of topics. So you can learn a lot there. And I actually had a young woman who is from South Africa who contacted me, and she said she was trying to figure out whether to go into law or go into technology. And she decided that she wanted to become a cybersecurity lawyer and do cases because she was so intrigued by that. So yeah, that just was really cool.
That is cool. How gratifying. What a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
What issue do you most hope technology will help to resolve in the future?
I hope that technology can be used to really support and benefit everyone to get equal access and equal rights, as opposed to using technology for ways to restrict people from getting equal access and equal rights. Of course, with any type of technology, it can be used for the good or the bad, right?
Yes, absolutely. What inspires you?
My 23-year-old, he just got his computer science degree. So I'm building a new SaaS business, software as a service business, and I'm doing it with him. And I love doing that with him because I know he's so capable. And also my younger son, who's either getting a double major in aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering, I think, at this point. I'm inspired by seeing a 20-year-old and a 23-year-old who do not fit what you see as being described as young 20-year-olds and late teens so much in the news. I mean, they're so smart and they're very logical. It's like, yeah, they don't fit what I see being reported on the news every night and people complaining about.
Well, and it sounds like from their interests that you have inspired them as well.
Exactly.
So kudos to you. What is one thing that you'd like to learn more about, Rebecca?
I would like to learn more about music and art. I wish I could sing because I can't. I'm terrible, but I still like to sing here, and my Dobermans, they like to hear me sing, so that's good enough, I guess.
Rebecca, we're kindred spirits. I come from a very musical and art-filled family. We've been involved in music and drama ever since I can remember.
Awesome.
Yes, we love the art.
Yes, the arts are amazing. Describe the future in one word.
Possible. The future's possible. I mean, I hear a lot of gloom and doom, but anything's possible.
All right. Last one. Fill in the blank like a girl.
Think like a girl. I think that's, I see so many people, if they would maybe try to think like a girl, maybe then girls would have more opportunities because they wouldn't be spoken to in ways that, you know, after a while make them want to just try something else.
Wow.
Insight.
That's a light bulb moment.
Oh, good.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Rebecca, you have been, again, fascinating. You are such a font of knowledge, and I've learned a lot in our conversation today, and I know our listeners have too, and I just really appreciate your time. So thank you for everything that you're doing to help us all get wiser and safer in this new digital world.
Indeed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed chatting with you here today. So best of luck to everything and stay safe.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of We Get Real AF. We're excited to bring you the voices of amazing women and girls who are shaping the future for good.
Please help us spread the WeGraph mission of supporting women and girls in emerging tech and science. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Our handle is @WeGetRealAF. And visit our website at www.wegetrealaf.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and to subscribe to the podcast.
We also want to give a big shout out and thanks to Sam McLean for providing sound production for the show. You can find Sam on Instagram at McLean Sounds, that's McLeanSounds, and to our voiceover artist, Veronica Horta, for her show introduction. You can find Veronica on LinkedIn by searching for Veronica Horta, Horta.
We'll meet you back here next time for another great conversation about high tech with cool women.